Wagwan people, glad to have you back. Today, I've got another powerful story lined up, so sit tight and roll with me, because we're going to dive into a journey that will make you see Jamaica in a whole new light.
Today's story is for those who didn't know how Jamaica parishes got their names. Before Jamaica was divided into 14 parishes, before the British drew their lines across this Caribbean island, before colonizers even set foot on these shores, this land had names, names given by the Taíno people who called it home. But the story of how Jamaica's 14 parishes got their names, that's a tale of conquest, colonization, and the deliberate erasure of indigenous identity, a story rarely told in full.
I'm taking you on a journey through Jamaica's parishes, not just to learn their names, but to understand the hidden history behind each one. From the Spanish colonial period to British rule, each parish name carries secrets of power, religion, and the people who shaped this island nation. Have you ever wondered why your parish has the name it does? The answer might shock you. This is the untold history of Jamaica's 14 parishes.
Kingston, the Kingston. Let's start with the obvious. Kingston, Jamaica's capital and largest city. You might think Kingston was named after a British king, and you'd be right, but there's more to it. In 1692, a massive earthquake devastated Port Royal, once called the wickedest city on earth. 2/3 of the city sank into the sea, taking thousands of lives with it. Survivors needed a new settlement, fast. Colonel John Goffey laid out plans for a new town on the Liguania Plain. It was officially founded in 1693 and named in honor of King William III of England, Kingston. But here's what they don't teach you. The land where Kingston now stands, it was purchased from the Dawkins family, English settlers who had claimed Taíno lands as their own. Kingston wasn't just named after a king. It was built on the ashes of divine retribution and the stolen lands of indigenous people. Was this earthquake divine justice for Port Royal's wickedness? What do you think?
Surrounding Kingston is the parish of St. Andrew, established in 1867 when it was separated from St. Catherine. St. Andrew was named after St. Andrew the Apostle, one of Jesus' first disciples and the patron saint of Scotland. Why Scotland? Because many of the planters and administrators in this region had Scottish origins. They brought their patron saint with them, stamping their identity onto Jamaican soil. But here's the darker truth. St. Andrew became one of the wealthiest parishes during slavery, with massive coffee and sugar plantations carved into the Blue Mountains. Every time someone says St. Andrew, they're unknowingly invoking the patron saint of the very people who built fortunes on enslaved African labor. Now we travel east to St. Thomas, one of Jamaica's oldest parishes, established in 1662. Named after St. Thomas the Apostle, known as Doubting Thomas, because he questioned Christ's resurrection until he could see and touch the wounds himself. Ironic, isn't it, that a parish built on the enslavement of Africans would be named after a saint who demanded proof before believing. But St. Thomas holds a special place in Jamaican history. It was here in 1760 that Tacky's rebellion began, one of the most significant slave uprisings in Caribbean history. Tacky, a Coromantee chief enslaved on the frontier plantation, led hundreds in armed resistance against their oppressors. The rebellion was crushed. Tacky was killed, but his legacy, that lives on in every corner of St. Thomas. Should St. Thomas be renamed to honor Tacky instead of a biblical saint? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Northeast lies Portland, established in 1723 and named after the Duke of Portland, William Bentinck, who served as governor of Jamaica. Portland is often celebrated for its natural beauty, the Blue Lagoon, pristine beaches, lush rainforests. But scratch beneath that surface and you'll find the same story: indigenous displacement, colonial appropriation, and plantation economies built on human suffering. The Maroons, escaped enslaved Africans, found refuge in Portland's mountains, establishing communities that the British could never fully conquer. Moortown, one of these Maroon settlements, still exists today as a UNESCO heritage site. So while Portland bears a British duke's name, its true legacy belongs to those who resisted. Moving west along the north coast, we encounter St. Mary, established in 1867, but with roots going back to Spanish colonization. St. Mary was named after the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus. The Spanish were devout Catholics, and they named many of their settlements after saints and holy figures. When the British took over Jamaica in 1655, they maintained many of these Spanish names. St. Mary was home to Sevilla la Nueva, the first Spanish capital of Jamaica, established in 1509. The Spanish abandoned it within decades due to disease and poor planning, but the Catholic influence remained. Here's what's haunting. While the Spanish honored the Virgin Mary with this name, they simultaneously enslaved and worked to death the Taíno population. By 1611, the Taíno people were functionally extinct in Jamaica, victims of disease, brutality, and forced labor. The Virgin Mary's name couldn't save them. How does it feel knowing these religious names were used while indigenous people were being wiped out? Next door to St. Mary is St. Anne, established in 1866, but named during Spanish rule after St. Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. St. Anne is famous as the birthplace of two Jamaican icons, Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley, two men who would challenge global systems of oppression, both born in a parish named by colonizers. The Spanish called this area Santa Ana. When the British took control, they anglicized it to St. Anne, but the indigenous name, that was Jamaica, which the Spanish heard as Jamaica, meaning land of wood and water. Every time we say Jamaica, we're speaking a ghost of the Taíno language, filtered through Spanish ears. Here's what's haunting. While the Spanish honored the Virgin Mary with this name, they simultaneously enslaved and worked to death the Taíno population. By 1611, the Taíno people were functionally extinct in Jamaica, victims of disease, brutality, and forced labor. The Virgin Mary's name couldn't save them. How does it feel knowing these religious names were used while indigenous people were being wiped out?
West of St. Anne sits Trelawny, established in 1770 and named after Sir William Trelawny, Governor of Jamaica from 1767 to 1772. Trelawny was carved out of St. James and St. Anne during the height of the sugar economy. This parish became one of the wealthiest in Jamaica, with some of the most brutal plantation conditions in the Caribbean. It was here that the Second Maroon War erupted in 1795, sparked by the flogging of two Maroons in Montego Bay. The Trelawny Maroons fought fiercely, but were eventually defeated through treachery. The British promised them peace if they surrendered, then immediately deported over 600 Maroons to Nova Scotia and later to Sierra Leone. Governor Trelawny's name remains on this parish. The Trelawny Maroons' descendants are scattered across the globe. Imagine being promised peace, then being shipped thousands of miles from your home. How would you feel?
Continuing west, we reach St. James, established in 1655 when the British captured Jamaica from Spain. St. James was named after St. James the Greater, one of Jesus' apostles. Like St. Andrew, this name reflects British religious influence and the importance of saints in colonial naming practices. But St. James is home to Montego Bay, Jamaica's second city, whose name comes from the Spanish Manteca Bay, meaning lard bay or butter bay. The Spanish used this harbor to export animal fat and lard back to Europe. From Spanish lard to British saints to modern tourism, St. James has been renamed and reimagined countless times, each layer obscuring the indigenous past beneath.
Before we continue, if you're finding this journey through Jamaica's hidden history eye-opening, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're uncovering the stories they don't teach in schools, and your support helps us bring more untold Caribbean history to light. Drop a comment and let me know which parish you're from and whether you knew its true origin story. Now, let's dive into the heartland parishes.
In Jamaica's northwestern corner lies Hanover, the smallest parish, established in 1723. Hanover was named after the House of Hanover, the royal house that ruled Great Britain from 1714 to 1901. King George I was the first Hanover monarch, and British colonists were eager to demonstrate their loyalty to the crown. But Hanover's small size didn't diminish its significance. This parish saw intense Maroon activity, with escaped enslaved people establishing communities in the Dolphin Head Mountains. These Maroons harassed plantations, freed enslaved people, and created autonomous societies beyond British control. The irony? A parish named after British royalty became a symbol of resistance against that very crown. Do you see the irony here? A parish named for British kings became a haven for those fighting British rule. South of Hanover is Westmoreland, established in 1703 and taking its name from Westmoreland County in England. This is straightforward colonial naming. British settlers simply transplanted English place names to Jamaican geography, imposing familiar identities onto unfamiliar landscapes. Westmoreland became a major sugar-producing parish, with massive estates like Roaring River and Frome dominating the landscape. Today, Frome is still operational as a sugar factory, though under government ownership. Westmoreland's name is a reminder that colonization wasn't just about economic exploitation. It was also about psychological domination, making colonizers feel at home by erasing indigenous place names and replacing them with echoes of England.
Moving east, we find St. Elizabeth, established in 1703 and named for Elizabeth Sedley, Countess of Dorchester. Wait, not Queen Elizabeth? No, Elizabeth Sedley was the mistress and later wife of Thomas Hicks Beach, who owned vast estates in this parish. Naming the parish after her was both flattery and a demonstration of his wealth and influence. St. Elizabeth is Jamaica's breadbasket, known for agriculture rather than sugar. The Black River, Jamaica's longest navigable river, flows through this parish, and for centuries it was a crucial transportation route. Here's the hidden story. St. Elizabeth had a lower enslaved population than other parishes because its economy was based on livestock and crops rather than intensive sugar production. This doesn't make it less complicit in slavery, but it demonstrates how different economic models shaped Jamaica's parishes differently. Can you imagine naming an entire parish after your mistress? The audacity of colonial power is staggering.
Northeast of St. Elizabeth lies Manchester, established in 1814 and named after the Duke of Manchester, who served as governor of Jamaica. By the time Manchester was established, Jamaica's sugar economy was already declining. This parish was intended for new agricultural and industrial ventures, reflecting a shift in colonial economic strategies. Manchester is unique in Jamaica's geography. It's entirely inland with no coastline. Its capital, Mandeville, was designed as a planned town with a clear grid pattern, unlike the organic growth of older coastal settlements. The Duke of Manchester's name marks this parish as a late colonial creation, born from the island's economic transformation rather than its initial conquest.
In central Jamaica sits Clarendon, one of the original parishes established in 1655. Clarendon was named after Edward Hyde, 1st Earl of Clarendon, who served as Lord Chancellor of England. Never setting foot in Jamaica, the Earl nonetheless had his name permanently attached to Jamaican soil, a common practice where colonial administrators honored powerful figures back in England. Clarendon holds a special place in Jamaica's industrial history. Here, the railway first arrived in the 1840s, transforming the transportation of goods from plantations to ports. May Pen, Clarendon's capital, became a crucial railway junction. But Clarendon also witnessed resistance. The Baptist War of 1831 to 1832, one of the largest slave rebellions in Jamaica, began in St. James but spread rapidly through Clarendon. Led by Samuel Sharp, a Baptist deacon, this rebellion involved over 60,000 enslaved people and helped hasten the abolition of slavery in British colonies. The Earl of Clarendon never witnessed any of this. His name simply endures. Think about that. 60,000 people rose up in rebellion. That's the power of resistance. Would you have joined them?
East of Clarendon lies St. Catherine, another original parish from 1655, though its roots stretch back to Spanish colonization. St. Catherine was named after Catherine of Valois, Queen of England in the 15th century, though some historians argue it could reference St. Catherine of Alexandria, a Christian martyr. What makes St. Catherine crucial is its location. Spanish Town, the former capital of Jamaica from 1534 until 1872, sits in this parish. When the British captured Jamaica, they kept Spanish Town as the administrative center for over 2 centuries. Spanish Town was originally called Villa de la Vega, the town of the plain. The British simply translated it to Spanish Town, acknowledging its origins while asserting their dominance. St. Catherine also houses Jamaica's Fort Augusta, built in 1740 to defend against potential Spanish or French attacks. The fort's presence reminds us that Jamaica was always contested territory, desired by multiple European powers for its strategic location and economic potential.
Here's what's rarely discussed. Before Spanish Town, before Villa de la Vega, before European colonization, this area was home to significant Taíno settlements. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated villages, ceremonial sites, and agricultural systems. The Taíno called this region part of Zayamaca. They fished in the Rio Cobre, hunted in the forests, cultivated cassava and maize. They had their own names for these places, names lost when Spanish soldiers arrived with diseases, weapons, and religious zeal. St. Catherine's history begins long before Catherine of Valois, but her name is what endures on maps. What would Jamaica look like today if the Taíno names had survived? If we honored indigenous geography instead of European nobility?
Look at what we've discovered. 14 parishes, and only one, Kingston, refers directly to its purpose as a settlement. Every other name honors British aristocrats, Spanish saints, or European royalty. Not a single parish name references the Taíno people who lived here first. Not one acknowledges African heritage, despite the fact that over 90% of Jamaica's population has African ancestry. No parish honors the Maroons who fought for freedom, or the enslaved people who built Jamaica's wealth through their suffering and labor. This is colonial naming as cultural erasure. Every time a Jamaican says their parish name, they're speaking the language of their colonizers. Does this bother you? Should Jamaica consider renaming its parishes to reflect its true heritage?
The Taíno divided Jamaica into different cacicazgos, territories ruled by caciques, chiefs. These territories had names: Sayamaca, Maima, and others now mostly lost to history. Their places had names too: Liguania, Mamibe, Poros, Agualta. Some survived, tucked into corners of the official map, but most were overwritten by Spanish and British designations. What would Jamaica look like if the Taíno names had survived? If parishes honored indigenous geography rather than foreign nobility? We'll never know. That knowledge was systematically destroyed.
But here's the powerful truth. Despite centuries of colonial naming, Jamaican identity has transcended these imposed labels. Marcus Garvey from St. Anne became a global symbol of black pride and resistance. Bob Marley from St. Anne spread messages of liberation and justice worldwide. Sam Sharp from Westmoreland led one of history's most significant slave rebellions. Nanny of the Maroons from Portland remains a national hero, the only woman among Jamaica's 7 national heroes. These Jamaicans used their parishes as launching points for revolutions that challenged the very systems that named those parishes. The parishes bear colonial names, but the people who inhabit them, they belong to no empire. This is what resilience looks like. This is what it means to transcend the names imposed on you.
Jamaica's 14 parishes tell a story of conquest, exploitation, and survival. Their names are monuments to colonialism,
reminders of who held power when boundaries were drawn and labels applied. But names are not destiny. Identity is not geography, and history is not determined by who gets to name the places we call home. Every Jamaican who stands in St. Thomas or St. Catherine or Portland carries within them a history that predates those names. A history of Taíno resistance, African survival, Maroon warfare, and persistent rebellion against every form of oppression. The parishes have their names, but Jamaica belongs to Jamaicans.
This is the untold history of Jamaica's 14 parishes. The names on the map tell one story, but the people who walk that land, they tell another. And that story is still being written.
If you found this journey through Jamaica's hidden history valuable, make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started with Untold Caribbean stories. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. What surprised you most about these parish names? Which parish do you think should be renamed, and what would you call it? Let me know in the comments below. Share this video with anyone who wants to understand the deeper meanings behind the places we call home. The algorithm only shows this to more people if you engage, so every like, comment, and share matters. One love.